Knights of the Old Republic was one of the cornerstones of my early gaming. It was a bittersweet experience filled with highs and lows that showed clear evidence of the rush placed upon Obsidian, given only half the time to create the game in comparison to BioWare on the first. Despite some brilliant moments, there were bugs, glitches, some dialogue inconsistencies, and I vividly remember playing one day, feeling I had a good 5 to 10 hours left of the experience, when all of a sudden it just ended. I even went as far as reloading the old save game to see if I'd made a mistake, but alas, that was the end. Or so I thought. It turns out the experience was filled with cut content that was simply dropped due to the rushed release. Led by a couple of heroes, the modding community came together and in 2009 released the Sith Lords Restored Content mod. That fixed over 500 of the bugs in the game and it looked to improve the ending. It's a testament to the work they did that Aspyr have officially endorsed this mod, and while it's not 100% confirmed that they'll be using that, it looks incredibly likely as they've endorsed it on their Mac version of the release. That end game content is actually coming as part of a post-game free DLC, so as it stands we're looking at the initial release experience. Question: will this be the best version of Knights of the Old Republic 2? Statement: let's find out.
Unnecessary addendum.
The narrative is set 5 years after the original game, and it centers around the exile. He awakes aboard an asteroid mining colony, rescued by the unusual Kreia, and all we know of him is that he's an exile and once an adept Force user. Kreia's allegiance to the light or dark is kept opaque, and as with the previous game, you're given free reign over your own journey. And it's through your dialogue choices that you'll shift your player towards the light or dark, and your influence over your party members will drag them, sometimes kicking and screaming, towards your intended path. Interpersonal conversations can happen at any time, and to the game's credit, it does a great job with the side cast of characters.
Yeah, me too. I'll be in my chambers. But since I don't have any, I guess I'll just go to the cockpit like I always do.
One standout, the now infamous HK-47, is an assassin droid who's dripping with dark humour, but with a sharp, sometimes abrupt, sardonic tone.
Statement: so, I cannot harm you.
Obsidian would go on to create Fallout New Vegas and Outer Worlds, and their style, albeit in its infancy, can clearly be seen through their narrative drive. As mentioned, the issue with story really comes towards the end, and how that will be resolved remains to be seen. Gameplay follows a very familiar formula to the first title. You control the character using the analog sticks, and when combat is engaged, everything freezes. Unlike the first on Switch, the gigantic combat engaged dialogue box seems to have become simply a small slither of its former self, and thankfully so. When an enemy's spotted, everything freezes, and the player can stack up a number of actions for each of their characters. Pressing the L bumper resumes play, and the actions are carried out. Now, before any of this, you'll be creating your own character once again, and with this release you could choose one of 3 different Jedi classes. It would alter their adeptness with lightsaber skills or force powers, but it also tweaks the difficulty of the experience, with the Jedi Guardian being the default. The beauty of these games was in the freedom with which you could approach many of the situations, and it's only solidified with some of the more binary choices between good and evil actions, although opportunities to carefully walk the grey areas are equally offered to the player. Through the open-ended choice system, you can partake in or skip entire questlines. The camera controls seem to have had some tweaks. I've been playing through this on PC for the last 3 weeks in anticipation of this review, and the controller options over there just don't feel right. Here though, things are much better, but I am a tad disappointed, if not entirely surprised, that they haven't included some options for sensitivities. Through both combat and dialogue, you'll gain experience to level up your character. Dependent on the character you created, you'll have a number of points to allocate into certain areas, anything from computer ability to the security skill. These will change the way that you approach certain quest lines. But of equal consideration and importance are the items and gear that you equip to your characters. The armor type, for example, which affects your dexterity, or the many melee or ranged weapons. With everything working on an adapted AD&D rule set, that means that there's a chance to hit statistic happening behind the scenes, and ensuring that you're adept with a certain weapon will massively increase your ability to use it. Once again, the story spans several different planets, with a couple returning from KOTOR 1, and the game still has that childlike, exploratory feel when you land upon a new planet and you see its surface and inhabitants for the first time. and the adventuring is facilitated with your ship, the trusty Ebon Hawk. Some of the locations, particularly the earlier areas, show signs of some of the rush in their design, and obviously as it stands, the ending is, well, just as it always was. So it's a real testament to the core gameplay that it's as fun as it is. For me, gameplay scores 18 out of 20. It's just as fun as the first game, with the controls scoring 16 out of 20. Some sensitivity or access options would have been nice. And then we get onto what may be the most important area for most of you, and that's the visuals and performance in both docked and handheld on the Nintendo Switch. As we've seen Aspyr do in a few of their Star Wars releases, they're targeting 60 frames per second. Unfortunately though, the game doesn't always maintain that. It's fine for most of the playtime, but sometimes it will dip right down to the high 30s and then shoot back up again. Now, to test to see if this was their fault or if this is an engine problem, I actually booted it up on my PC and experienced the worst drops in exactly the same areas. And while that suggests it's potentially an engine issue, in some of the largest areas it will drop down. Now, for me, that's not really a huge issue. What would be worse is if the game had any crashes, and the game has some crashes. I've experienced 3 crashes so far. In KOTOR 2, you can save at any point, and it's something you're going to have to do. It's a particular pain in a title like this, because you can go long periods of time without a save, even with the autosave switched on. It makes it all the more important to manually save your game. It wasn't a deal breaker, and in 20 hours, 3 crashes might not sound like the worst thing ever, but it probably amounts to around about 3 or 4 hours of lost progress. I also experienced one other issue. There seems to be a problem with resuming your game. If you go away and leave your Switch for a while and then return, you might experience some black textures on absolutely every character. The solution to this is simply to save and reload and it's gone, but they've a little work to do. On the flip side of that, it feels like some of the original quirks have been sorted out, but you can guarantee we'll release a video that completely covers the patch content that gets released post-launch. In-game resolution looks to be native in both docked and handheld, and textures have been, I don't want to say upscaled, it looks more like an up-res, and it can leave some of them looking a little unusual. And the brightness calibration seems to be a bit wonky. I'd just leave this at the default, otherwise everything looks washed out. And as you can see, text size is absolutely fine in handheld mode, and they've included a little bit of HD rumble. As ever, the soundtrack is exceptional. The voice actors do a brilliant job, and I can't fault the audio in any way, shape or form. Visuals and performance, well, they're no spring chicken anymore, and there are a couple of extra quirks thrown in for good measure. They score 13 out of 20, but the soundtrack, dialogue and audio is borderline flawless. It scores 20 out of 20. KOTOR 2 is going to set you back only £12.59 on the Nintendo Switch, and you're looking, like the first game, at a 30 to 50 hour experience. These are genre classics as far as I'm concerned, warts and all, and the fact that Aspyr have embraced the modding community, or so it seems, really puts a smile on my face. It's not an expensive price to pay, and they're releasing that DLC completely free to play, albeit after the fact. This one has a download size of 16 gigs, so it is going to take up quite a bit of space, but it's space that I think you should allocate to it. I give value 18 out of 20. Knights of the Old Republic, the Sith Lords, set a precedent for Obsidian to go on to be one of the most impressive storytelling studios of the last 20 years. It's brilliant to see that the game will finally get the ending that it deserves. They just need to sort out a few of those bugs, particularly the crashes that I experienced. Still, Knights of the Old Republic 2 gets a SwitchUp score of 85%. There you go. So that's it for this review. Let me know what you think of it. I know that you could say that 85% is a high score when a game has some crashes in there, but that's been reflected in the visuals and performance score. But do be aware of it. If you're picking this one up, make sure you manually save often. And I've pinged the publishers to let them know of the issue, so I'm sure we'll be seeing a patch pretty soon. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content, that enjoy the channel. If you want to check out our review of the first game, I'll pop one of those little clicky things up the top so you can go check that out after this video. Thanks to our patrons, you guys are amazing. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!